I'm already getting tagged in the headlines about obesity surging to 70% of the population. I want to show you the study that this is based off of. It was this JAMA article right here that was just published on the 5th. So how did they come up with this new 70% compared to usual 40%? Well, they took the traditional BMI cutoffs that we usually see, that 30 BMI body mass index, 30 kilograms per meter squared, and they added the new Lancet definition of obesity or anthropometric obesity, and you had to have at least two of these. So either an elevated waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, or waist to height ratio. And by including these new definitions, you can see it goes from that around that 40%, adds an additional about 30% of people who don't meet the BMI criteria, but meet these other anthropometric criteria because they have more abdominal obesity. They went a little bit further and looked into the whole preclinical versus clinical obesity. As I've talked about this before, this is kind of that new definition, whether you actually have issues arising from that excess adipose tissue. And what they found is 36% of people in the whole cohort had issues, that whole clinical obesity. So things like blood pressure and that type of thing, issues from their adipose. They then did some even more analyses and looked at what happens to these people in these different categories. And you can see it right here. This kind of controversy because they say they don't have obesity, but they have dysfunction. I would argue that if they have dysfunction, things that arise from excess adipose tissue, they do have obesity. But my brother and I will do a podcast kind of diving into this. But really cool analyses. I think it just goes to show that, people can actually have lower BMIs and still have obesity. And on the same token, you can have a higher BMI and not have obesity, but it's actually quite rare. They did the analysis, and there's very few people that had an elevated BMI don't have those other elevated waist circumference or waist to height ratio or waist to hip ratio.